while you were writing the trading game? Have you found it therapeutic almost?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the book runs until 2014, which is when I quit finance. And obviously it's coming out now 10 years later. Most of the writing was done in the last sort of year and a half. You know, I came out of trading quite traumatized, to be honest. And I needed to spend a lot of time rolling ideas around in my head. It's called a confession. And I think there's a lot of sort of questions to be asked. You know, a lot of people instinctively say, you made a lot of money working in finance. That's wrong. That's immoral. But where were they when I was 13? You know what I mean? You know, where are they when my sister needs money to buy a house? You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. What sort of people are you talking about, Gary? Who says that to you? Are you sure it's actual people? It's not your own conscience?
No, I definitely see them. Trust me, you should read my YouTube comments. No, there's definitely, I think, really, I want to get people asking these questions. I'll tell you what, it's very easy to point in the bankers and say they're the problem.
Yeah, of course.
And there's a lot of media about finance that points to the bankers and says they're the problem. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of institutions out there that are supposed to help kids like me.
Yeah.
You know, we've got the welfare state, which is falling apart.
Sure.
Charities, religious institutions, you know, schemes for diversity. None of them were there for me.
Sure.
The guys that took me out of poverty were the banks.
Right.
And
right. Crikey.
There's a story that I want to tell about, really for me, the big picture story is 3 levels, basically. Me, the individual, the banking industry as an industry, and our society. And 3 levels of what happens when you make a person, an industry, and a society obsessed with money, and what it does to them spiritually, and what it does bizarrely to them economically. Because, you know, I made millions of pounds and I end up sleeping on a mattress on a cold floor in an unfurnished house. And I think what we see as a society, you know, I've got a YouTube channel and I put videos out every week saying if we don't deal with wealth inequality, living standards will collapse and your kids will live in poverty. And the number one most common message I receive by a million miles is, Gary, how do I make money?
Right. It's followed by, why don't you give all yours away?
Yeah.
I imagine. I've seen some of them.
Presumably the guys who ask that will pay for my YouTube channel once I give it away.
But the distinction here is between the individual and the institution, isn't it? It's why your book, your life is so important, so fascinating, because you constantly walk that tightrope between what it's done to you. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit like, I have a catchphrase when I'm talking about people who voted to make themselves poorer without realizing what they were doing. I always say contempt for the con men, compassion for the conned. Yeah. But it's sometimes quite hard to know where that line is, isn't it? Between the people that are encouraging the culture and falling victim to the culture, while at the same time thinking that they love it.
Sometimes I feel angry at the state of the world.
Sure.
I think it's easy to point fingers, but listen, I am somebody, and this is described in great detail in the book, who has made millions of pounds because I believe and I bet on the fact that our country is going to fall into desperate poverty. And I don't just say that, you know, I was one of the best paid traders in the world because I believe that. You can look at my predictions for the beginning of COVID. They've all come true. And I have anger, and you can see some of that in the book. But
so what you're agitating for is a world in which you wouldn't be able to make money in the way that you do. But as long as you can, as long as that world exists, it's pointless to, because if you don't, because money is essentially, well, it's not quite finite, is it, with quantitative easing and stuff like that. But in terms of that pot of money there, it's going to end up somewhere. You would rather it ended up there, but it's not going to. So why shouldn't it end up there with you?
There's a story.
Is that fair?
There's a story in the book. So I first started betting on sort of the collapse of the economy, early 2011. And it just happened massively coincidentally that about a week or two after I put that bet on, the Fukushima earthquake happened and 20,000 people died in Fukushima. And I made something like $11 million, which I put in the book, $550 per person. And I think it's very obvious I didn't cause the Fukushima earthquake here, you know what I mean?
Thanks for clearing that up.
Yeah. But it makes you think, doesn't it? Yeah, it makes you. But I think probably the big picture I want you to think about for that is, after that, I went on to bet on the collapse of living standards in this country, across Europe, in the US. And I made even more money, much more money. And for that, I got paid millions of pounds. Since then, I've quit that job.
Yeah.
And I've spent 10 years trying to sort of connect with governments, media, political institutions, think tanks, to say, for free, by the way,
Yes, of course.
to say, we need to stop this.
Yeah.
How much have I achieved? You know, we're growing. Listen, we have built a society where the best paid 10,000 economists in the world are all traders. And they are legally not allowed by their employers to talk publicly. And I could go back and I could make a couple of £1 million a year working for these guys, you know?
I mean, just in case anyone needs that explaining, the point is that they're making a ton of money out of understanding an economy that is taking us all essentially to hell in a handcart, or taking society to places of inequality that would become close to apocalyptic.
Yeah. But number one, they get paid massively more to bet on it than they ever could get paid trying to fix it.
Yeah.
And number two,
it's like tax.
A kid like me, right, from nowhere,
Yeah.
from nothing, can walk into the city and within 2-3 years be a famous millionaire.
Well, let's do that then. So you're in your second, third year at LSE when you start thinking, how do I get? Let's start with the first day at LSE actually, and the tale of the tracksuit.
Oh, the tracksuit, yeah. So you know what an Echo tracksuit is?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I don't know if they're still popular, maybe not. It's kind of like it's not a onesie, but like a colour coordinate with this big rhino on the front. I used to have a navy blue and white one, which I love, which I wore to LSE, and went into my first economics lecture, which is in a massive West End theatre, like 1,000 students, and everyone's filing in. And I had a very clear plan at LSE, which was you sit at the front, every lecture, every class, and you understand everything that they say. And if you don't understand, you'll ask a question. So I walked in with my little sort of Nike string backpack and my Echo tracksuit, sat on the front, and started asking the professor questions. And, there's a bunch of kids of Chinese and Arab billionaires thinking who the hell is this kid, basically? Yeah. And I think they just thought this kid is mad, basically. And then...
But the quality of the questions you were asking must have given the lie to the idea that you were mad.
You know what?
Wouldn't it?
I think some people at LSE might be upset with this, right?
Go on.
In my opinion, LSE is a university nowadays which does not primarily pick its students based on intelligence.
No, its ability to pay
Listen,
fees.
if everybody's their dad is a millionaire,
Yeah.
have they picked the smartest kids in the world?
Yeah.
And what percentage of kids in the world have a dad who's a millionaire?
So, I mean, what that leads us to, and we're jumping around a bit too much, which is my fault. That leads us to the idea that you don't actually have to be that intelligent to make an awful lot of money in the city, but you do to make it in the way that you made it. I think you need to have I want to get to this ability to read the runes, as it were. But again, so you thrive at LSE, you smash your exams.
Yeah.
You presumably come to the attention of people for all sorts of reasons, partly because of your apparent background, and that makes people go, well, he doesn't. I'm not quite sure what hole this peg is supposed to fit into. Did you have any good relationship with teachers? Were there any professors that took you
There were
under
a couple
their
of teachers.
wing?
There was one first-year teacher called Vinayak Nagaraj, Indian guy from India, not British Indian, who was really sort of encouraged me, try and understand. Some of the maths guys were really nice. I love maths. I think there's a particular culture within economics that is, in my mind, quite elitist. But really, it's funny. I grew up with these sort of British Indians and British Pakistanis. I ended up hanging around with Indian Indians and Pakistanis because it was kind of what I was used to. And, I'm still friends with a lot of them today. But I look back writing the book. When I was a teenager, I was insane. I was so competitive. I wouldn't allow myself to be beaten in any exam, really. So I think really...
That's who you were, though. I'm the guy that comes top.
Yeah, well, I think it comes partly from getting expelled from school at 16.
Right.
I got expelled from school a year before my GCSEs, and I didn't have no school to go to, and I had to study for a year lying down on the floor of my front room. You know what I mean?
With your own books. Was there some class issues involved in that, do you think? You describe it as being expelled for selling £3 worth of weed. If you had been the son of one of the people you describe in the book, one of the wealthy, do you think it would have happened to you? Do you think you had a little target on your back? Maybe?
I think they would have expelled anyone who was the guy who brought the weed in, even if it was £3 of weed. But why was I the one who brought the weed in? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you've got one kid in there who knows 10 drug dealers on his street and doesn't have no money, and you've got 10 kids in there that never met a drug dealer in their life and have got a lot of money.
They've got a lot of money.
Yeah, you know, it's this is Adam Smith. This is the invisible hand of the market at work.
Before we crack on, how traumatic was that? How upset were your mum and dad when that happened?
A long time ago.
I know, but
Just turned
still.
16. Yeah,
we mentioned before we sat down, I went
Yeah.
through something similar at a completely different school. And the thing for me looking back is the fact that and also my dad couldn't really afford to send me to the school he sent me to. So when I got slung out, it was such a kick in the teeth for him. But presumably going to grammar school would have been a big deal for your mum and dad. And then
Yeah, they're also very religious. My parents are very religious. So my dad got called to pick me up and didn't say much. I remember in the car he just said like, what did it feel like? And I just said, felt right. I went home and I went straight to bed and I woke up in the middle of the night and my mum was crying. I write about this in the book.
Yeah, I know.
And I remember thinking, and that's, in a sense it's a horrible thing to think, but this is what I thought at the time. I remember thinking, what are you crying for? I'm the one who's getting me out of this. You know, you're not going to have to. I'm the one who's going to have to work my tits off, you know, the whole year to get me out of this. And I knew I would get me out of it. But, you know, I was quite known as like the smart kid in this school. And everyone thinks you're going to go to Cambridge and suddenly everyone thinks you're going to go to prison.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And it hardened me a lot. I mean, and one good thing is it totally stopped me taking drugs, which I think was a very good thing. But it's a lot to put on a 16-year-old kid.
Yeah. And it's a lonely business as well, isn't it? As you've just touched on. Because, I mean, your mum's coming at it from a place of care, as I know you know, and she's worried about you. Whereas you're coming at it almost from a mathematical perspective and you're saying, well, hang on, I can't translate your care and your love and your concern into exam grades. The only person that can get the numbers, as in the exam marks, is me. So spare me the sentiment.
I guess looking back, you're looking back and you sort of, you see a kid who's angry at the unfairness around him.
Again.
You know what I mean?
Again.
And he continually knows no one's coming through.
Yeah.
No one's ever coming
You've mentioned this a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's a real recurring theme for you,
it's not
isn't
just, you know, I know there'll be people that watch this, especially, you know, young people from back.
No, I'm not suggesting for a minute that it's a unique experience. And it's another great illustration of the difference between our experiences growing up is that at a school like mine, there's people teaching you not just what the difference is between Manchester University and Manchester Metropolitan, but the difference between Christchurch College, Oxford and Brasenose College. I mean, just this language, this vocabulary of privilege that we talked about at the beginning. What I am quite interested in is how alive you were to it when probably most of the kids you were at school with, even the ones who had similar ambitions to you, would not have been as alive to the...
As a young man, I didn't know.
Okay.
You look back and, you know, you writing the book, you do a lot of looking back.
Yeah.
I was numb to it. And I think that there's a kind of, in this culture we give to young people, especially young men, but not just young men, that tells them, you are the money you make. And if you don't make money, you're a failure. And if you do make money, you're great. And simultaneously gives them virtually no realistic chance of making money. You're kind of training a psychopathy into these guys. Yeah. Because you put them in an impossible situation. Yeah. You put them in an impossible... There's a Japanese horror movie I like called Battle Royale. Have you ever seen it?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's Hunger Games ripped it off. Send a class of Japanese school kids to an island and you say, now fight to the death, one of you wins. And this is kind of the situation that we put young people in, because nowadays, young people from poor backgrounds, what chance do they have? You know, I went to my friend's 50th birthday party the other day and one of his nephews was there. And he's a fan of the channel. He's Gary, how do I make money? What do I say to these kids? Yeah. What do I say to these kids? You know, be born 30 years earlier. You know, if you want to make money nowadays,
or be born rich.
The best strategy, have a rich dad. Yeah. You didn't have a rich dad, try again. You know what I mean? Like, really, what do I tell these kids? Yeah. You know, if they tell me I want to learn Japanese, I'll give them the textbooks. Sure. If they tell me I want to get really ripped, I'll tell them go to the gym every day. What chance do the young people have?